The cabin door slammed shut against the howling wind. Daniel's hands were numb, his lungs burning from the freezing air. Beside him, trembling and pale, was the woman who had destroyed his life. Victoria Hale, the billionaire CEO whose signature had closed the factory, had erased his career, had shattered hundreds of families, including his own. Now she was dying of hypothermia in his arms. The storm outside screamed like a living thing, trapping them together in this frozen hell. He could save her, or he could let the mountain take what it wanted. The choice should have been easy. But before I tell you what Daniel decided, I need you to hear the whole story. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The first snowflake hit Daniel Harper's windshield at 4:47 p.m., exactly 13 minutes before the mountain tried to kill him. He barely noticed it. His mind was locked on the elementary school pickup time he'd already missed, on Emma's teacher standing with his 6-year-old daughter in the cold, on the apologetic text he'd sent explaining that the construction job had run late again. Single father, unreliable. The labels stacked up like unpaid bills. The second snowflake came with 1,000 friends. Daniel's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as Highway 40 transformed from asphalt to suggestion. The old Ford pickup, 15 years past its prime, held together by duct tape and optimism, groaned as wind slammed against its frame. The radio had died somewhere around mile marker 23, leaving only the drum of snow against metal and the whistle of wind through the cracked passenger window he couldn't afford to fix. "Come on, baby," he whispered to the truck, as if it were a spooked horse. "Just get me home. Just get me to Emma." The mountain had other plans. Visibility collapsed from 100 yards to 50 to 10. The world became a white tunnel, the road beneath him more memory than reality. Daniel eased off the accelerator, feeling the tires search for traction that wasn't there. He'd grown up in these mountains, knew their moods, their dangers, their sudden violent shifts from beautiful to deadly. This wasn't normal. This was the kind of storm that made the morning news, the kind where they found cars in spring that had vanished in winter. His phone buzzed. Emma's school. He couldn't answer, both hands welded to the wheel, eyes straining to find the yellow center line that had disappeared beneath the white. The buzz stopped, started again, stopped. "I'm coming, sweetheart. Daddy's coming." Then he saw it. The luxury SUV was tilted at a 45-degree angle, its front end kissing the ditch like it was trying to drink from it. Fresh model. Obsidian black, chrome gleaming even in the gray-white chaos. The kind of vehicle that cost more than Daniel earned in 3 years. Maybe 4. His foot moved toward the gas pedal. Not his problem. Emma was waiting. The school would call social services if he was too late again. He'd already lost his job, his health insurance, his retirement. He couldn't lose his daughter. But his father's voice echoed in his head, rough and certain. "You don't leave people on the mountain, son. The mountain doesn't care about your schedule." "Damn it!" Daniel pulled onto the narrow shoulder, praying another vehicle wouldn't come barreling through the white. He threw the truck into park and stepped out into a wall of cold that stole his breath. The wind hit him like a physical thing, shoving him against the door. Snow pelted his face, each flake a tiny knife. Temperature had to be dropping below 0 with the wind chill. He stumbled toward the SUV, leaning into the gale. Through the tinted windows, he could see movement. Someone was still inside. Daniel wrapped his knuckles against the driver's window, the impact barely audible over the storm's roar. The window descended 2 inches, heated, automatic, still working despite the angle of the vehicle. A woman's face appeared in the gap. Mid-30s. Sharp cheekbones. Dark hair pulled back severely. Eyes that assessed him in one cutting glance. Worn Carhartt jacket, scuffed boots, calloused hands. Her expression shifted through several emotions in quick succession: relief, calculation, distrust, desperation. "I need your help." Not a request. A statement of fact. Her voice carried this crisp authority of someone accustomed to obedience. "Can you get out?" "The door won't open fully. The angle—" She gestured impatiently, as if the physics of the situation were a personal affront. Daniel yanked on the handle, fighting the resistance. The door opened 8 inches before jamming against the earth. Not enough. "You'll have to climb through the window." She stared at him like he'd suggested she fly. "Ma'am, this storm is getting worse. You need to get out now." Something in his tone must have penetrated her shock. She nodded curtly, gathered her coat, cashmere, he noted, useless against this cold, and began the awkward maneuver through the window. Daniel reached to help her, caught her arm as she slipped. Her hand gripped his with surprising strength. When her feet hit the ground, the wind nearly knocked her over. She was wearing heels, actual heels, on a mountain highway, in a snowstorm. "Do you have boots? Different shoes?" "In the back. I can't." "Forget them. We need to move. My truck." They fought their way back to the Ford. Daniel practically shoved her into the passenger seat, slammed the door against the wind, and rounded to the driver's side. His fingers were already going numb. Inside, she was shaking, from cold or shock or both. She pulled out her phone, stabbed at the screen with increasing frustration. "No signal." She said it like the laws of physics had personally betrayed her. "There won't be, not until we're down the mountain." Daniel put the truck in gear, eased back onto the road that he could barely see. "Where were you headed?" "Evergreen Summit, the resort." Daniel almost laughed. Evergreen Summit was 30 miles ahead, and if this storm kept building, the road would close within the hour, if it hadn't already. "That's not happening today. I'm going to try to get us down to Millbrook. Maybe 10 miles if we're lucky. The truck's back end slid right. Daniel steered into it, felt the tires catch, slide again. The woman gripped the door handle, her knuckles as white as the world outside. "If we're lucky?" Her voice climbed half an octave. "If we're lucky, we make it to town. If we're not, there's a ranger cabin about 3 miles up. Old Firewatch station. It's off the main road, but..." The truck hit a patch of ice disguised as road and decided to pirouette. Daniel spun the wheel, tapped the brakes, fought the physics of metal and ice and gravity. They rotated 90 degrees, then 180, the white world spinning like a kaleidoscope. The woman's scream cut through the enclosed space. They stopped, somehow facing the right direction, somehow still on the road. Daniel's heart was trying to break through his ribs. His breath came in sharp gasps that fogged the windshield. Beside him, the woman was frozen, eyes wide, both hands braced against the dashboard. "We're okay," he said, though his voice shook. "We're okay. We most certainly are not okay." Her composure was cracking, real fear bleeding through. "This is insane. We need to call someone. Highway patrol, emergency services, someone." No signal, no help coming. Daniel squinted through the windshield. He could barely see 5 feet ahead. "Listen to me. We have 2 choices. Try for town and probably end up in a ditch or over a cliff, or make for the cabin and wait this out." "A cabin? You mean like out there?" She gestured at the apocalyptic white. "Yes, out there. It's got a fireplace, some supplies. It's survival equipment, not the Ritz, but it'll keep us alive." "This is ridiculous. I have a meeting tomorrow in Denver, a board presentation. I can't just..." "Ma'am, I don't know who you are or what meeting you have, but right now the mountain doesn't care. That storm is going to get worse before it gets better, and we're running out of time and visibility. So what's it going to be?" She turned to look at him fully for the first time. Really look at him. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her because she gave a short, sharp nod. "The cabin." Daniel shifted into 4-wheel drive and began the crawl off the highway. The turnoff to the old access road was somewhere near marker 31, if he could find it, if it wasn't already buried. If they didn't slide off into the trees that he knew flanked both sides but could no longer see. The woman was silent now, her breathing the only sound besides the groan of the engine. Daniel counted off landmarks in his head, the lightning-split pine, the rock outcropping shaped like a bear's head, the bend where the Johnson's boy had crashed his dirt bike in 2009. There. The break in the trees was barely visible, but Daniel knew it like he knew his own driveway. He turned, felt the truck buck as it left the relative smoothness of the highway for the rutted access road. Branches scraped against the sides. Snow was already knee-deep here, the truck pushing through it like a ship through heavy seas. "How far?" The woman's voice was tight. "Quarter mile. Maybe less." It took 15 minutes to cover 200 yards. The cabin materialized out of the white like a ghost. Small, wooden, ancient. One of the old Firewatch stations from the 50s, maintained just enough to provide emergency shelter for hikers and rangers. Daniel had been here once before, years ago, with his father during a hunting trip. He killed the engine. The sudden silence was absolute, broken only by the wind's shriek. "Stay close to me. Hold on to my jacket. Do not let go." She nodded, her earlier authority completely gone. Just fear now, human fear. They stumbled out into the storm. The cold was a living thing, attacking exposed skin, stealing breath, seeking to drain all heat and life. Daniel grabbed her hand, small, soft, trembling, and pulled her toward the cabin door. Snow was already piled against it. He kicked, shoved, threw his shoulder against old wood. It gave way. They fell inside together, landing hard on the wooden floor. Daniel kicked the door shut, cutting off the wind's scream. The temperature inside was barely above freezing, but without the wind it felt like a sauna by comparison. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They just lay there on the floor, gasping, trembling, alive. Then the woman started laughing, not humor, hysteria edged with shock. "This is insane. This is absolutely insane." Daniel pushed himself up, his body aching. "Welcome to the mountain, ma'am." He found the emergency supplies in the metal cabinet exactly where they were supposed to be. Matches, 2 wool blankets that smelled of must and mouse, a Coleman lantern with maybe a quarter tank of fuel, some canned goods, water bottles frozen solid. Not much, but enough. The fireplace was filled with old ash and what looked like a bird's nest. Daniel set to clearing it while the woman stood in the center of the room, still in her useless coat, still wearing those ridiculous heels, looking around at the bare wooden walls like she'd been transported to another planet. "There's firewood," Daniel said, gesturing to the stack beside the door. "It'll be frozen, slow to catch, but it's all we've got. Can you? I don't know how to build a fire." He paused, looked at her, really looked at her. Designer coat, manicured nails, the kind of posture that came from expensive boarding schools and executive coaching. She wasn't trying to be helpless. She genuinely had no idea. "Okay, can you unpack those blankets, shake them out, check for spiders or mice?" She nodded, grateful for a task she could manage. Daniel worked the fire. His fingers were clumsy with cold, but muscle memory took over. Birch bark from his pocket. He always carried some during winter. The smallest twigs arranged teepee style. Strike, strike, strike. The 4th match caught. A tiny flame, precious as diamonds. He fed it carefully, breath held, watching it grow. The woman had the blankets spread on the floor, had found 2 more in another cabinet. She was shaking less now, purpose steadying her. "What's your name?" Daniel asked, feeding larger sticks to the growing fire. She hesitated, just for a second. "Victoria." "I'm Daniel, Daniel Harper." Another pause, longer this time. He glanced back at her, saw something shift in her expression. Recognition? No, something else, something uncomfortable. "Harper," she repeated slowly. "You worked at Hale Industries, the manufacturing plant in Millbrook." The words hit Daniel like a fist to the gut. He turned fully to face her, the fire forgotten. "How did you—" Then it clicked. The authority, the expensive everything, the way she gave orders like breathing. Hale. Victoria Hale, the CEO, the billionaire, the woman who had signed the closure order that put 200 people out of work, including him. The cabin suddenly felt much smaller. "You shut down the factory." His voice was flat, empty. It was a business decision. The facility was underperforming. The numbers. Daniel stood, his hands clenched. 200 families. 200. Do you know what happened to those numbers, Ms. Hale? Tom Rodriguez worked quality control for 20 years, lost his house. Bill Chen, assembly line supervisor. Heart attack 6 weeks after the closure. Sarah Mitchell, single mother of 3. Last I heard, she was working 2 part-time jobs and still couldn't make rent. Victoria's face had gone very still. "I didn't. No, you didn't. You didn't know. You didn't see. You just signed the papers and moved on to the next quarterly report. I had shareholders to answer to, fiduciary responsibilities. The plant was losing money. It was losing money because you starved it for investment for 3 years. We asked for equipment upgrades, training programs. We could have pivoted to—" Daniel stopped himself, took a breath. The fire was crackling behind him, indifferent to human anger. Doesn't matter now, does it? The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Outside, the wind howled. The cabin creaked. Snow hammered against the windows. "My daughter," Daniel said finally, his voice rough. "Emma. She's 6. I was supposed to pick her up from school 2 hours ago. She's probably terrified. And I can't even call her because I'm stuck on a mountain with the woman who destroyed my life." Victoria flinched, actually flinched. "I'm sorry. Are you?" Daniel turned back to the fire, unable to look at her. "Or are you just sorry that you're stuck here with one of the numbers?" No answer. The fire grew, throwing dancing shadows on the walls. Daniel fed it methodically, watching the flames consume the frozen wood. The temperature in the cabin was rising slowly, maybe 40 degrees now. Still cold enough to see breath, but survivable. "There's a phone," Victoria said quietly, "at the ranger station. Maybe if we—" "This is the ranger station, and that phone hasn't worked in 5 years. Budget cuts." "Of course." Her laugh was bitter. "This is what I get. What you get. Karma, fate, whatever you want to call it. I shut down a factory, and now I'm trapped with someone who lost everything because of me. It's almost poetic." Daniel threw another log on the fire, harder than necessary. Sparks flew up the chimney. "This isn't about poetry, Ms. Hale. This is about survival. Whatever happened before, whatever will happen after, right now we're stuck here together. The storm's only getting worse, temperature's dropping. We need to work together or we're both going to freeze to death. Can you do that?" She met his eyes. Hers were brown, he noticed, dark and currently reflecting the firelight. "I can do that." "Good. Then help me move these crates. We need to block the worst of the drafts." They worked in silence. Victoria proved surprisingly strong for someone who looked like she lived on salads and spin classes. Together they wedged old supply crates against the door and windows, using the blankets to stuff gaps where wind whistled through. The cabin had one room, maybe 15 feet by 20, a fireplace, a small counter with a dry sink, 2 wooden bunks built into the walls, a table, 3 chairs. "Food," Daniel said, checking the cabinet. "We've got beef stew, 15 years past expiration. More beef stew, beans, some kind of soup, and what I think used to be peaches. Are they safe to eat? Canned goods can last decades if the cans aren't compromised. We'll check for bulging or rust. Might taste like metal, but it won't kill us." Victoria nodded, accepting this as fact from someone who clearly knew more than she did about survival. The fire was strong now, actually throwing real heat. Daniel found a dented pot and filled it with snow from outside, set it near the flames to melt. Water first, then heat, then food. The hierarchy of survival his father had drilled into him. "How long?" Victoria asked. She'd taken off her useless coat and was huddled near the fire in a silk blouse that was equally useless. She was shivering. "Storm like this? Could be hours. Could be 2 days. 2 days." She said it like he'd announced a death sentence. "You have somewhere you need to be? Besides anywhere but here?" She wrapped her arms around herself. "I have a board meeting tomorrow at 2, quarterly earnings report. If I miss it, the shareholders will wait, or they won't. Either way, there's nothing you can do about it from here." She looked like she wanted to argue, but the words died on her lips. Instead, she just stared into the fire, her expression unreadable. Daniel found himself studying her despite his anger. She was beautiful in that carefully constructed way of wealthy people, the kind of beauty that required personal trainers and nutritionists and probably some amount of cosmetic assistance. But there were cracks, exhaustion around her eyes, a tightness to her jaw that spoke of stress. She looked, he realized, deeply tired. "Why were you driving yourself?" he asked. "Someone like you, I'd expect a driver, an assistant, an entourage." "I wanted to be alone." The answer came out sharp, defensive, then softer. "I needed to think about some decisions. The resort seemed like a good place to clear my head." "Ironic." "What?" "You wanted to be alone, and now you're stuck with me." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Yes, ironic." The wind picked up, shaking the cabin. Snow was piling against the windows, blocking out what little light remained. The temperature outside had to be approaching 0, maybe past it. Daniel checked his watch. Nearly 7 p.m. Emma would be home by now. The school would have called someone. Maybe his neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She had a key for emergencies. Emma trusted her. She'd be okay. She had to be okay. "Tell me about her," Victoria said suddenly. "What?" "Your daughter, Emma. Tell me about her." Daniel's first instinct was to tell her it was none of her business. But something in her voice, genuine curiosity, maybe even genuine caring, stopped him. "She's 6, first grade, smart as hell, smarter than me already, probably. Loves dinosaurs. Not the cute cartoon ones, the real ones. Knows all their names, can tell you which period they lived in. She wants to be a paleontologist. That's specific for 6. She knows what she wants." Daniel smiled despite everything. "Gets that from her mother." "Her mother?" "Died when Emma was 2, cancer." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry." "Yeah." Daniel poked at the fire. "Me too. Sophie was... She was everything. Losing her, losing the job. It's been hard. But Emma's strong. She keeps me going. And you were rushing home to her when you found me." It wasn't a question, but Daniel answered anyway. "Yes." "So you chose to help me even though it meant letting her down." "I chose to help someone who needed help. That's what you do." "Not everyone would." Daniel shrugged. "Maybe they should." More silence. The pot of water was bubbling now. Daniel found 2 ancient mugs, rinsed them with the hot water, and started a second pot. Coffee would have been good. Tea would have been better. But hot water would do. "Here." He handed her a mug. "Hold it. It'll warm your hands." Victoria wrapped both hands around the chipped ceramic, held it like it was precious. "Thank you." They sat like that for a while. 2 enemies turned unlikely companions, united by nothing except the need to survive the night. The temperature continued to drop. By 9 p.m., Daniel estimated it was well below 0 outside. The fire helped, but the cabin was old, drafty, never meant for prolonged occupation. He could see Victoria shivering despite being right next to the flames. "You need better clothes." "Obviously, but unless you have a Nordstrom in your pocket, I'm out of options." Daniel went to the storage cabinet, dug through the emergency supplies, found an old ranger's jacket, men's large, musty, but thick. "Put this on, over your blouse." She didn't argue, just pulled it on. It swallowed her, but she immediately stopped shivering as much. "Better?" "Yes, thank you." He found the canned stew, checked it for rust and bulging. Looked okay. Popped it open with the ancient can opener and set it near the fire to warm. It smelled like metal and salt, and probably shame, but it was calories and warmth. They ate in silence, sharing the pot and 2 spoons. Victoria didn't complain about the taste or the presentation or the fact that they were eating 15-year-old mystery meat. She just ate, mechanically, fuel for the body. "When did you last eat?" Daniel asked. "This morning. Coffee and a protein bar." "That's not eating." Says the man feeding me expired stew from a can. Despite everything, Daniel almost smiled. Point taken. The wind outside was a constant roar now, shaking the entire structure. Snow had completely covered the windows, turning them into walls of white. They were sealed in, buried alive in a coffin of wood and ice. "Daniel?" Victoria's voice was quiet. "What happens if the storm doesn't stop? If no one can reach us?" "Then we wait. Keep the fire going, ration the food and water, stay warm." He met her eyes. "We survive." You sound very certain." "I grew up here. I know these mountains. They're brutal, but they're not impossible. We've got shelter, fuel, supplies. As long as we keep our heads, we'll be fine. And if we don't keep our heads, then we have problems." She nodded slowly, accepting this. Then, "I really am sorry about the factory. I know it doesn't change anything, but I want you to know that I am." Daniel stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. Part of him wanted to throw that apology back in her face, but another part, the part that sounded like his father, reminded him that anger wouldn't keep them warm. "Apology noted," he said finally. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. The night deepened, the cold intensified, and somewhere outside, the mountain storm raged on, indifferent to the two lives huddled together against its fury, indifferent to the complicated history that bound them, caring only for its own wild, ancient power. Neither of them knew that the worst was yet to come, that survival would demand more than just firewood and canned stew, that before the storm ended, they would have to face choices neither of them was prepared for. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, they simply had to make it through. The fire had burned down to coals by the time Daniel woke, his back screaming from the wooden floor. He'd given Victoria the better of the two bunks, an instinct he couldn't quite explain considering their history. The gesture felt automatic, divorced from the anger still simmering beneath his ribs. He checked his watch, 2:47 a.m. The cabin was dark except for the dying red glow from the fireplace, and cold, much colder than when they'd gone to sleep. Daniel pushed himself up, every joint protesting. His breath formed clouds in the air, visible even in the darkness. That wasn't good. The temperature had dropped significantly. He moved to the fireplace, added kindling, blew gently on the coals until small flames flickered to life. Once they caught, he added larger pieces of wood, watching the fire rebuild itself. The warmth felt like a miracle. A sound from the bunk made him turn. Victoria was curled in a tight ball under both blankets, shaking. Not the gentle tremor of someone merely cold. This was violent, uncontrolled shivering. "Victoria?" He crossed to her. Even in the dim light, he could see her lips had taken on a bluish tint. Her face was pale, waxy. "Victoria, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened, unfocused. "Cold," she managed through chattering teeth. Daniel's hand went to her cheek, ice cold. He grabbed her wrist, felt for her pulse. Too slow. Her skin felt wrong, not just cold, but lifeless. Hypothermia. Early stages, but unmistakable. "Okay, listen to me." He kept his voice calm, steady. "You're going into hypothermia. I need to get you warmed up. Can you stand?" Tried. Can't. The fire was growing, throwing real heat now, but the cabin was too large, too drafty. The warmth dissipated before it could do any good. Daniel's mind raced through options, discarding them as fast as they came. More blankets wouldn't be enough. Hot water. Yes, but not sufficient on its own. The fire alone couldn't raise her core temperature fast enough. That left one option, the one that made his stomach knot. "Victoria, I need to bring you closer to the fire. I'm going to carry you." She nodded weakly. Daniel slid his arms under her, lifted. She weighed almost nothing, or maybe the adrenaline made her feel that way. He set her down on the pile of blankets he'd arranged near the fireplace, wrapped two around her shoulders. "Better?" he asked, though he could see it wasn't. She was still shaking violently. No. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, thinking. The textbook answer was clear. He'd taken wilderness first aid courses years ago when he'd worked summers as a hiking guide. Hypothermia treatment, remove wet clothing, prevent further heat loss, warm the core before the extremities, and if necessary, his jaw clenched. "Victoria, I need you to focus. Your body temperature is dropping too fast. The fire isn't enough. Do you understand what I'm saying?" She looked at him, confusion clouding her features. "The fastest way to raise your core temperature is skin-to-skin contact. Body heat transfer. It's a medical procedure, it's just medical. But I need your permission." Understanding dawned slowly in her eyes, followed by something that might have been fear or might have been calculation. Her gaze held his for a long moment. "I'm not going to—" Daniel stopped, started again. "I have a daughter. I'm not that kind of man. This is purely about keeping you alive, but it's your choice." Victoria's shaking intensified. Her lips moved, trying to form words. Finally, "Do it!" Daniel nodded once, sharp. He pulled off his jacket, his flannel shirt, leaving only his thermal undershirt. The cold hit him immediately, but he ignored it. He wrapped the largest blanket around both of them, creating a cocoon, then carefully positioned himself behind her, pulling her back against his chest. The cold radiating from her body was shocking, like holding a block of ice. "This is going to feel worse before it feels better," he warned. "Your body is going to try to reject the warmth at first. Just stay with me." Victoria didn't respond. Her shaking had become almost convulsive. Daniel tightened his arms around her, careful to keep the embrace clinical, impersonal. Heat transfer. That's all this was. Science. Minutes crawled by. The fire crackled, wind howled, and slowly, impossibly slowly, he felt her body temperature begin to stabilize. The violent shaking eased to strong tremors, then to shivers. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. "Less like I'm dying." Her voice was stronger, clearer. "Still cold, but less empty." "That's good. That's the feeling returning. Your core temp is rising." More silence. The situation's awkwardness settled over them like a third presence. Here they were, billionaire and factory worker, CEO, and casualty of her decisions, locked together in the most intimate proximity short of actual intimacy. "Daniel?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for not leaving me to freeze." "You already thanked me for pulling you out of the SUV. I mean for not leaving me to freeze now. You could have. Part of you probably wanted to." Daniel didn't answer immediately. Honesty seemed important in this strange, dark space they occupied. "Maybe. For about 5 seconds. Then I remembered that I'm not the kind of person who lets people die, no matter what they've done. Even though I destroyed your life. You made it harder. You didn't destroy it. I still have Emma, still have my health, still have enough stubbornness to keep going." He adjusted the blanket around them. "Besides, letting you freeze wouldn't bring back the factory, wouldn't give Tom Rodriguez his house back, or bring Bill Chen back to life. It would just make me a murderer." Victoria was quiet for so long he thought she might have fallen asleep. Then, "Bill Chen had a heart attack?" 6 weeks after the closure, stress, the doctors said. He was 53, had a grandson on the way. Never got to meet him. He felt her body tense against his. "I didn't know." "How could you? You were already on to the next acquisition, the next quarterly report. We were just line items on a spreadsheet. Facility closure? Projected savings? $8 million annually. What's 200 jobs against $8 million? It's not that simple. Isn't it?" "No." There was heat in her voice now, strength returning. "You think I don't see the human cost? You think I sleep well knowing people lost their livelihoods? I have a responsibility to shareholders, to the company, to thousands of other employees who depend on Hale Industries staying profitable. So you sacrifice the few for the many. Very utilitarian. What would you have done?" Victoria shifted, trying to turn to look at him, but the blanket cocoon made it impossible. The plant was hemorrhaging money. 3 years of losses. If I'd kept it open, eventually the whole company could have gone under. Then everyone loses their jobs. All 6,000 employees, is that better? Daniel didn't have an answer for that. The logic was sound, even if he hated it. "You asked what I would have done," he said finally. "I would have talked to us, the workers. We had ideas, ways to improve efficiency, reduce waste, modern equipment that could have cut production time by 30%. But no one asked. No one came down from the executive floor to actually see what we were doing or hear what we needed. I receive hundreds of reports. Plant managers are supposed to communicate those needs. And when the plant manager is trying to protect his own job by making everything look better than it is, when the numbers on your desk are fiction designed to avoid scrutiny," Victoria went very still. "Are you saying Marcus falsified reports?" "I'm saying there was a gap between what you were told and what was actually happening. But that's the problem, isn't it? You're so far removed from the actual work that you can't see the gap." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Daniel fetted another log one-handed, keeping the blanket tight around them. Victoria's shivering had mostly stopped now, her breathing more regular. "I built that company from nothing," Victoria said quietly. "My father started Hale Industries in a garage in 1987, manufactured small machine parts. When he died, I was 26 years old with an MBA and no practical experience. The board wanted to sell, break the company apart. I fought them. Spent the next 10 years growing us from 50 employees to 6,000, from 5 million in revenue to 800 million. Congratulations, you're very successful." "I'm very isolated," she corrected. "You want to know the truth? I can't remember the last time I had a conversation with someone who wasn't trying to get something from me. Every interaction is transactional. Every relationship has an angle. My assistant wants advancement. My VPs want my job. My board wants returns. Even my friends, especially my friends, Want access or connections or the social capital of being seen with me. Poor little rich girl. Mock all you want. Doesn't make it less true. Victoria's voice hardened. You think I don't know what people say about me? Ice Queen, Dragon Lady, the woman with a balance sheet where her heart should be. You think I don't feel the weight of every decision? But if I show weakness, if I show doubt, the wolves start circling. In my world, vulnerability is blood in the water. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness, he wasn't ready for that, but maybe the beginning of understanding. So you close yourself off. Make the hard choices alone. Never let anyone close enough to see the human being under the CEO. Exactly. Sounds lonely. It is. The admission came out barely above a whisper. It's incredibly lonely. They sat in silence, the firelight casting dancing shadows on the cabin walls. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside, wrapped in blankets and unlikely honesty, something had changed. The anger between them hadn't disappeared, but it had become more complicated, textured with nuance it hadn't held before. Can I ask you something? Victoria's voice was soft now, almost vulnerable. Why did you come back for me? At the SUV, you could have driven past. Gotten home to Emma. No one would have blamed you. Daniel considered the question. My father used to say that character is what you do when no one's watching. When there's no reward, no recognition. Just the choice between easy and right. He paused. I guess I wanted to be the kind of man my daughter could be proud of, even if she never knows about it. She's lucky to have you. She'd be luckier if I could keep a job. Have you found work since the closure? Construction, day labor, whatever I can find. Nothing steady, nothing with benefits. It's enough to keep us fed and housed, barely. But Emma's getting older. She'll need braces soon. Maybe glasses. College someday. He laughed, bitter. College. I can barely afford to keep the lights on. What did you do at the plant? Started on the line, assembly. Worked my way up to shift supervisor. Was training for quality management when you shut us down. You were good at it? I was. No false modesty, just fact. I understood the work, understood the people, could see problems before they became failures. But that doesn't matter much when the whole facility disappears. Victoria shifted again, and this time Daniel loosened the blanket enough for her to turn partially toward him. In the firelight, her face looked different, softer. The executive armor had cracked, revealing someone more human underneath. I want to say I'm sorry, she said. Really sorry. Not the corporate sorry where we regret any inconvenience. I mean that I'm genuinely sorry for the pain I caused. To you, to Bill Chen's family, to all of you. I made a business decision without fully understanding the human cost, and that was wrong. Daniel met her eyes. Brown, he noticed again. Dark and currently reflecting something that looked like genuine regret. Apology accepted, he said. Doesn't change the past, but I appreciate it. What would change it? If you could go back, what would you want me to do differently? Come to Millbrook, walk the floor, talk to the people who actually do the work. See us as human beings instead of labor costs. Daniel's voice was steady, certain. The answers were there. We could have saved that plant if anyone had bothered to listen. I'm listening now. Now doesn't help. No, Victoria agreed. It doesn't. The fire was burning steady now, the cabin's temperature slowly rising. Daniel realized with some surprise that he was actually warm, and that Victoria's body against his no longer felt like ice, but like another human being, alive and present. Can I tell you something? Victoria asked. Something I've never told anyone? We're trapped in a cabin on a mountain in a blizzard. Might as well. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Sometimes I fantasize about walking away, selling the company, taking the money and disappearing. Maybe buy a small house somewhere quiet, read books, learn to cook, have conversations that aren't about market share and quarterly earnings. Why don't you? Because 6,000 people depend on me. Because my father built that company with his bare hands and trusted me to protect it. Because I don't know how to be anything other than Victoria Hale, CEO. She paused. Because I'm afraid that without the title and the company and the success, there's nothing underneath. Just an empty woman who's good at spreadsheets and terrible at being human. Daniel heard the pain in those words, the fear. That's not true. How would you know? Because a person who is truly empty wouldn't care about being empty, wouldn't question their choices, wouldn't feel guilty about a factory closure. He adjusted the blanket. You're not empty, Victoria. You're just buried under a lot of armor. Armor that's kept me safe. Armor that's kept you isolated, he corrected. There's a difference. She was quiet for a long time. Then, what was she like? Your wife? The question surprised him. Sophie. You don't have to talk about her if you don't want to. But Daniel found that he did want to. Maybe it was the darkness, the intimacy of survival, the strange, confessional quality of the moment. Or maybe it was simply that he hadn't talked about Sophie, really talked about her, since she died. She was chaos in human form, he said, and couldn't help smiling at the memory. Loud, messy, always running late, left coffee cups everywhere, sang off key in the shower, cried at commercials, laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them. She sounds exhausting. She was. She was also brilliant and kind and completely fearless. When she was diagnosed, the doctors gave her 2 years. She lasted 4, fought every single day. Even when she couldn't get out of bed, she'd make me bring Emma in so she could read to her. Right up until the end, she was more worried about us than herself. She sounds like she was an incredible mother. The best, Daniel's voice caught. Emma was so young when Sophie died. Sometimes I worry she won't remember her. I try to tell her stories, keep Sophie alive that way, but it's not the same as having her here. You're doing it alone, raising her. Yeah, that must be terrifying. The honesty of the statement struck him. Not pity, not sympathy, just acknowledgement of the truth. It is. Every single day I'm terrified I'm going to mess her up, that I'm not enough, that she needs things I can't give her. Like what? Stability, security, a mother. Daniel stared into the fire. A father who can keep a job and provide for her instead of scrambling for day work and hoping the truck doesn't break down. You're more than a paycheck. Tell that to the school when I can't afford the field trip, or the doctor when she needs her checkup and I don't have insurance. Victoria was quiet. Then, what if you did have stability? What would you do? I'd sleep better. Make sure Emma has everything she needs. Maybe save for her college. Take her to see the dinosaur exhibit at the Natural History Museum in Denver. She's been asking for 2 years. He paused. Maybe even think about the future instead of just surviving the present. Those seem like reasonable goals. They seem impossible from where I'm sitting. Things change, Victoria said softly, sometimes in ways you don't expect. Daniel wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he didn't. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the storm raging outside. At some point, Victoria's breathing had evened out, her body fully relaxed against his. She was warm now, safe. The crisis had passed. He should probably move, create distance. The medical necessity had ended. But the cabin was still cold beyond the immediate circle of firelight, and truthfully, there was something comforting about the contact. Human warmth, simple presence, things he hadn't realized he'd been missing. Daniel? Victoria's voice was drowsy now, edged with sleep. No one's ever come back for me like you did. Come back to make sure I was okay. Not because they wanted something, just because it was the right thing to do. That's a pretty low bar. You'd be surprised how many people don't clear it. She shifted slightly. Thank you for saving my life twice in one night. You're welcome. Minutes passed. The fire burned. Daniel thought Victoria had fallen asleep, but then she spoke again, her voice barely audible. I'm going to fix this. What I did to Millbrook. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to find a way. Before Daniel could respond, her breathing had deepened into actual sleep. He sat there in the firelight, holding the woman who had destroyed his life, who had just promised to repair it, and wondered what the hell was happening. The storm outside showed no signs of stopping. If anything, the wind had grown stronger, the cold more intense. They were sealed in completely now, the windows just walls of white, the door blocked by drifted snow. No one knew they were here. No rescue was coming until the weather cleared. Daniel carefully adjusted the blankets, making sure Victoria was covered, then added more wood to the fire. The stack was getting low. They'd need to ration it carefully if the storm lasted another day. He should sleep, needed to sleep. But his mind was racing, processing everything that had happened in the last few hours. The anger he'd felt when he realized who she was hadn't disappeared, but it had become more complicated. She wasn't just the faceless CEO anymore. She was a person, flawed, lonely, capable of regret. That didn't excuse what she'd done, but maybe it made understanding possible. Daniel finally allowed himself to close his eyes, his arms still around Victoria, keeping her warm. Outside, the mountain storm raged on, indifferent to human complexity, to unlikely connections forged in crisis, to the way that sometimes the worst circumstances revealed people at their most honest. He dreamed of Emma, safe and warm with Mrs. Chen. Dreamed of Sophie, smiling that chaotic smile. And somewhere in the dreams he saw a path forward he hadn't seen before. Narrow, uncertain, but there. When he woke hours later, gray dawn light was trying to filter through the snow-covered windows. Victoria was still asleep in his arms, her face peaceful. The fire had burned low again, and outside, impossibly, the storm was still raging. Day 2, and they were still trapped together, still bound by survival, still discovering that the line between enemy and ally was far thinner than either of them had imagined. Daniel woke to find Victoria already awake, staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. For a moment, neither of them moved, caught in the strange intimacy of dawn light and tangled blankets and the memory of a night spent pressed together for survival. Then Victoria cleared her throat and carefully extracted herself from his arms. "Good morning." "Morning." Daniel sat up, immediately missing the warmth. The cabin was frigid again, his breath forming clouds. "How do you feel?" "Alive. Thanks to you." She stood, wrapped one of the blankets around her shoulders like a cape, and moved toward the window. Snow completely blocked the glass, creating a wall of white. "We're buried." "Yeah." Daniel rebuilt the fire, coaxing reluctant flames from the coals. "Storm's still going. Can you hear the wind?" The answer was obvious. The cabin shook with each gust, wood creaking in protest. If anything, the blizzard had intensified overnight. Victoria turned from the window, her face drawn. "How long can we last?" "Really?" Daniel assessed their situation with the cold calculation of someone who'd grown up learning to survive mountain winters. "Firewood will last another day if we're careful. Maybe a day and a half. Food. We've got enough canned goods for 3 or 4 days of rationed meals. Water isn't a problem as long as we can melt snow. So we're okay. For now. If the storm breaks today or tomorrow, we're fine. If it doesn't..." He didn't finish the sentence. Victoria nodded slowly, processing. Then she did something that surprised him. She rolled up the sleeves of her borrowed ranger jacket and said, "What can I do to help?" "You sure? I'm not going to sit here being useless while you do everything. Put me to work." Daniel studied her for a moment, this billionaire CEO in her silk blouse and designer pants, asking to do manual labor. "All right, we need to organize our supplies. Inventory what we have, ration it properly. Can you handle that?" "I run a company with 6,000 employees. I think I can count cans." Despite everything, Daniel almost smiled. Fair enough. They worked together in a surprisingly comfortable rhythm. Victoria proved methodical and efficient, cataloging their food stores, calculating daily calorie needs, creating a simple spreadsheet on paper from an old notebook she'd found. Daniel cleared the chimney, reinforced their draft barriers, and ventured outside long enough to gather more firewood from the covered pile beside the cabin. The brief exposure to the storm reminded him just how deadly it was. The temperature had to be 15 below zero, maybe colder with the wind chill. Snow came in horizontal sheets, visibility measured in inches. He could barely see his own truck, now completely buried, just a vague hump of white in the driveway. When he stumbled back inside, arms loaded with frozen logs, Victoria had hot water waiting. "You look half frozen," she said, taking the wood from him. "Half feels generous." Daniel's fingers were numb despite his gloves. He held them near the fire, wincing as feeling returned in painful prickles. Victoria handed him a mug of hot water. Not coffee, not tea, just hot water, but it felt like luxury. "We have 8 cans of various soups and stews, 4 cans of vegetables, 2 cans of something that might be fruit cocktail. That gives us approximately 1,200 calories per day each if we ration carefully. That's below recommended intake, but enough to survive on for several days if necessary. She consulted her notes. The real question is hydration and heat. We need to keep drinking water, and we need to keep the fire going. You've been doing research. I found a wilderness survival manual in the cabinet. Figured I should educate myself on how not to die. She sat down across from him, her expression serious. Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay? What are our actual chances? Not the optimistic version, the real odds. Daniel took a long drink of hot water, considering his answer. If rescue comes in the next 24 hours, we're fine. If the storm breaks and we can hike down to the highway, we're fine. If neither of those things happens and we're stuck here for 3 or 4 more days, he paused. Then it becomes about staying warm and staying rational. The cold will be the biggest threat, then dehydration, then hunger. In that order? In that order. Victoria absorbed this with a calm that impressed him. No panic, no hysteria, just acceptance of facts. Then we focus on heat. Everything else is secondary. Agreed. They ate a sparse breakfast, half a can of soup, warmed and shared between them. It tasted like salt and tin and desperation, but it was warm and it was calories. Daniel found himself watching Victoria as she ate, noticed the way she'd adapted to their circumstances. No complaints about the food, the cold, the situation, just quiet determination. What are you thinking? She asked, catching him staring. That you're tougher than you look. I'll take that as a compliment. It is one. They cleaned up in silence, washing the pot and spoons with melted snow water, rationing even that precious resource. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside, warmed by fire and purpose, they'd found a strange equilibrium. Tell me more about Emma, Victoria said suddenly. You mentioned she likes dinosaurs? Daniel settled back against the wall, grateful for the distraction. Obsessed with them. Started when she was 4. Sophie bought her this picture book about prehistoric creatures, and that was it. She memorized every species, every time period. Can tell you the difference between Allosaurus and Tyrannosaurus. Explain why Brontosaurus isn't actually a real classification anymore. She sounds brilliant. She is. Sometimes it scares me how smart she is. She asks questions I can't answer. He smiled at the memory. Last week she wanted to know why we can't bring dinosaurs back with DNA from mosquitoes, like in the movies. I tried to explain about DNA degradation and the half-life of organic molecules, but honestly, I was making half of it up. Victoria laughed. A real laugh, not the polite corporate sound he'd heard before. What did you tell her? That science is still working on it, and maybe by the time she's a paleontologist, she'll figure it out herself. Good answer. Thanks. I'm getting better at the impossible questions. Daniel paused. Though the hardest ones aren't about dinosaurs. What are they about? Her mom. Why she died. Why she can't come back. Why life isn't fair. His voice grew quiet. Those I still don't have good answers for. Victoria was silent for a moment, then said softly, I lost my father when I was 26. It's not the same as losing a mother as a child, but I remember feeling like the universe had broken a fundamental promise. Like if I was good enough, worked hard enough, did everything right, the people I loved should be protected. But they're not. No, they're not. She stared into the fire. My father had a heart attack in his office, just collapsed at his desk. By the time I got to the hospital, he was gone. No goodbyes, no final words, just gone. I'm sorry. He was supposed to teach me how to run the company. We had plans. 5-year transition, gradual handoff, mentorship. Instead, I got thrown into the deep end with no preparation, surrounded by executives who thought a woman my age couldn't possibly handle it. Her jaw tightened. So I became harder than them, colder, more ruthless. I made sure no one could ever question whether I deserved my father's legacy. And you've been proving yourself ever since. Every single day. Victoria looked at him. That's not an excuse for the factory closure, but it's context. I've spent 12 years terrified that if I show any weakness, any doubt, everything my father built will collapse. So I make the hard decisions, and I don't let myself think about the human cost, because if I did, I'd never be able to function. Daniel heard the pain beneath her words, the exhaustion. That sounds like a lonely way to live. It is. but it's kept the company alive, kept 6,000 people employed. Sometimes I think that has to be enough. Is it? Enough? Victoria's laugh was bitter. Ask me yesterday and I would have said yes. Ask me now, sitting in a freezing cabin with someone whose life I ruined, and I honestly don't know anymore. The honesty of the statement hung between them. Daniel found himself reconsidering everything he'd assumed about her, not excusing her decisions, but understanding the weight she carried, the impossible calculations she made. Can I tell you something? He said, and I want you to really hear it. Okay. You're not just your father's legacy. You're not just the CEO. You're a person, and persons are allowed to be uncertain, to make mistakes, to care about the human cost of their decisions. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Victoria's eyes glistened in the firelight. No one said that to me in 12 years. Then you're surrounded by the wrong people. She smiled, sad and genuine. Probably. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, something had shifted. The anger that had colored their first interactions had faded, replaced by something more complex. Not quite friendship. Too soon for that. Too much history. But understanding. Recognition of shared humanity. What would you do? Victoria asked suddenly. If you could do anything, if money wasn't an issue, if you had complete freedom, what would Daniel Harper do with his life? No one had asked him that in years. The question felt almost absurd given his circumstances, but he let himself consider it seriously. I'd finish my degree, he said finally. I was 3 semesters away from a bachelor's in industrial engineering when Sophie got sick. Had to drop out to work full-time, cover medical bills. I'd go back, finish that. Then maybe get into manufacturing design. I always loved the problem-solving aspect, figuring out how to make production more efficient, safer, better. You'd stay in manufacturing? Yeah, I know it sounds stupid given what happened, but I actually loved the work. Loved seeing raw materials transform into finished products. Loved the precision of it, the teamwork, the satisfaction of a smooth production run. He paused. I was good at it too. Before everything fell apart, I had ideas for process improvements that could have saved the plant. But no one wanted to hear from a line worker with some college and big dreams. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, tell me. Tell you what? The ideas, the improvements. What would you have done to save the plant? Daniel almost laughed. You're serious? Completely. We're trapped in a cabin. We have time. And I'm genuinely curious what I might have missed. So Daniel told her about the bottleneck in Assembly Line 3 that slowed production by 18%, about the quality control checkpoints that could be consolidated without sacrificing safety, about the equipment upgrades that would cost money up front, but pay for themselves in reduced downtime within 8 months, about the cross-training program that would make workers more versatile and engaged. Victoria listened intently, asking sharp questions, pushing back on assumptions, treating the conversation like a real business strategy session. By the time Daniel finished, she was making notes in the margin of her survival manual. You're right, she said finally. These are good ideas, really good. Why didn't Marcus include them in his reports? Because they came from the floor, not from management. And because implementing them would have required admitting the current system wasn't optimal. Marcus was more interested in protecting his position than improving operations. That's a failure of leadership. That's a failure of culture. You built a company where people are afraid to bring you problems. The words were harsh, but Victoria didn't flinch. You're right. I did. I was so focused on appearing strong, on never showing doubt, that I created an environment where only good news traveled upward. The bad news just got buried or massaged until it looked acceptable. And now 200 people don't have jobs. And now 200 people don't have jobs, she repeated quietly. Daniel, I meant what I said last night. I'm going to fix this. I don't know exactly how yet, but I'm going to find a way to make it right. Words are easy. Action is hard. I know, but I'm not just saying it to make myself feel better. I'm saying it because for the first time in 12 years, I can see past the spreadsheets to the actual human cost, and I can't unsee it. She met his eyes. You did that. This storm did that. Being forced to sit here and face someone I hurt, it's changed something. Daniel wanted to believe her. Part of him did believe her. But years of disappointment had taught him caution. We'll see what happens when we get off this mountain. It's easy to make promises when you're trapped and scared. Harder to keep them when you're back in your boardroom with your shareholders demanding returns. Fair enough. Victoria accepted the skepticism without argument. I'll have to prove it through action. The day wore on. They rationed firewood carefully, keeping the fire smaller than either would have liked, huddling close to conserve heat. They shared another sparse meal at what they estimated was noon, though time had become fluid in the endless white. They talked about Emma's school, about Victoria's first job out of college, about Daniel's father and the lessons he'd taught, about Sophie and the way grief never really goes away but learns to coexist with joy. Somewhere in those hours, Daniel realized he was enjoying the conversation. Victoria was sharp, funny when she let herself be, surprisingly well-read. She admitted to stress buying books she never had time to read, to falling asleep during movies because she was always exhausted, to sometimes eating dinner standing at her kitchen counter because sitting at a table alone felt too sad. "You live alone?" Daniel asked. "In a penthouse that cost more than most people make in a lifetime, yes. 5,000 square feet of empty rooms and expensive furniture I barely notice." She laughed without humor. "I have a housekeeper who comes 3 times a week. She probably spends more time there than I do." "No relationships? No one?" "No one." Victoria's voice was matter-of-fact. "I dated in my 20s before I took over the company, but once I became CEO, every man I met either wanted something from me or was intimidated by me. The ones who wanted something were transparent. The ones who were intimidated were exhausting. Eventually, I stopped trying." "That sounds lonely." "It is, but it's also simpler. No complications. No one to disappoint when I miss dinner because of a crisis. No one to resent me for choosing the company over them." She pulled the blanket tighter. "What about you? Since Sophie?" "Nothing serious. A few dates that went nowhere. Mostly I'm too tired and too broke to think about it. And I have Emma to consider. I'm not going to bring someone into her life unless I'm certain they'll stay." "That's very protective." "She's already lost her mother. I won't risk her getting attached to someone who might leave." Victoria nodded slowly. "You're a good father, Daniel. I hope you know that." The sincerity in her voice caught him off guard. "I'm trying. Some days I'm barely keeping my head above water, but I'm trying." "Trying is enough. She'll remember that you tried." They fell into silence, watching the fire dance. Outside, the storm showed no signs of relenting. If anything, the wind had picked up, shaking the cabin's walls, testing the integrity of their shelter. Daniel checked the firewood supply and felt his stomach clench. They were burning through it faster than he'd hoped. Another day? Maybe less. "Daniel?" Victoria's voice was small. "What happens if rescue doesn't come? If we run out of wood?" He didn't want to answer, but she deserved honesty. "Then we have to make hard choices. Bundle up in every blanket we have. Stay in one small area to conserve body heat. Hope the storm breaks before hypothermia sets in again." "And if it doesn't?" "Let's not think about that yet. We're not there." But the fear was present now, a third occupant in the cabin. They both felt it, even if they didn't speak it aloud. The storm had been raging for nearly 36 hours. In the mountains, blizzards could last for days. They might have enough supplies to wait it out, or they might not. As if sensing his thoughts, Victoria moved closer to the fire, closer to him. "Last night, when I was hypothermic, I thought I was going to die. And the strangest thing was, I wasn't afraid of death itself. I was afraid that I'd die without having really lived, without having made a real connection with another person, without having mattered outside of balance sheets and quarterly reports. You matter. Do I? Or does Victoria Hale, CEO, matter? There's a difference." She turned to look at him. "If I died tomorrow, the company would replace me within a week. Some VP would step up, the machine would keep running, and within a year most people would forget I existed. But what mark would I have left? What human connection? Who would grieve for me, not for what I represented, but for who I actually was?" Daniel didn't have an easy answer for that. "I think you're selling yourself short, but I also think you're right that there's more to life than professional success." "What's the more? How do you find it?" "You're asking the wrong person. I'm a single father living paycheck to paycheck who can't keep a job. I'm not exactly an expert on living well." But you have Emma, you have purpose, you have love. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. That's more than I have. Daniel reached out, surprising himself, and took her hand. It was warm now, no longer the ice-cold thing he'd held the night before. Then change it. When we get out of here, make different choices. You have money, power, resources. Use them to build a life, not just a career. I don't know how. Neither did I when Sophie died. But you figure it out. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Victoria squeezed his hand, held it for a long moment before releasing it. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, just The afternoon dissolved into evening. They shared their last full meal, a can of stew and some vegetables, carefully rationed. The fire was kept deliberately small to preserve wood. The temperature in the cabin dropped as night approached, both of them already wearing every layer they could find. We should probably, Victoria gestured vaguely at the sleeping arrangements. Yeah. Daniel understood what she wasn't saying. They'd need to share heat again, not because of hypothermia this time, but because the cabin was simply too cold to sleep separately. Same as last night, just practical. Just practical, she agreed. They arranged the blankets near the fire, creating a nest. This time there was no medical emergency, no life or death urgency. Just two people choosing to stay warm together. It felt different, more intimate somehow, without the excuse of survival. Daniel lay down first, and Victoria settled in front of him, her back to his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, pulled the blankets over them both. Her hair smelled like wood smoke and snow. Her body fit against his in a way that felt both strange and natural. Daniel? Yeah? I'm glad it was you, who found me, who stayed. I'm glad I wasn't alone up here. Me too, he said, and realized he meant it. Tim, despite everything, the factory closure, the anger, the complicated history, he was glad too. They lay there in the firelight, listening to the storm rage outside, neither of them speaking. At some point, Victoria's breathing evened out into sleep. Daniel stayed awake longer, his mind processing everything that had happened in the past 2 days. He'd come up this mountain angry at the world, at circumstances, at the woman now sleeping in his arms. But somewhere between survival and conversation and forced proximity, that anger had transformed into something more nuanced. He still believed she'd made the wrong choice with the factory, still felt the sting of that decision. But he could also see her humanity now, her struggles, her loneliness. And more than that, he could see possibility. Not romantic, that was too complicated, too fast, too unlikely. But the possibility of understanding, of forgiveness, of moving forward instead of staying trapped in bitterness. The fire burned low. Daniel added one more log, just one, carefully chosen, and watched it catch. Outside, the mountain storm continued its assault, indifferent to human complexity, to unlikely connections, to the way that sometimes being forced together revealed truths that distance obscured. Tomorrow, they would face whatever came. Rescue or continued isolation, safety or increasing danger. But tonight, they had warmth and shelter and each other's company. And somehow, impossibly, that felt like enough. Daniel closed his eyes and let himself sleep, his arms around a woman who had been his enemy, who had become something else entirely, who was teaching him that people were always more complicated than the roles they played, the mistakes they made, the walls they built around themselves. The storm raged on, but inside the cabin, two people slept peacefully, their quiet breathing mingling with the crackle of fire, their shared warmth a small defiance against the cold that sought to consume them. Morning arrived with the sound Daniel had almost forgotten existed. Silence. The wind had stopped. He woke slowly, disoriented, his internal clock confused by days of darkness and storm. Victoria was still asleep against him, her breathing slow and peaceful. But something had changed. The constant howl that had been the soundtrack to their imprisonment had ceased. Daniel carefully extracted himself from the blankets and moved to the window. With effort, he scraped away enough frost to peer through a small gap in the snow. Gray light filtered through. Not bright sunshine, but the diffuse glow of heavy cloud cover. And beyond that, stillness. The storm had finally broken. Is it over? Victoria's voice was rough with sleep. I think so. The wind stopped. She joined him at the window, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. Does that mean we can leave? Maybe. Depends on how much snow fell, whether the roads are passable, if my truck will even start. Daniel checked his watch. 7:23 a.m., day 3. Let me go outside, assess the situation. The cabin door was blocked by a wall of snow that took him 5 minutes to dig through using a piece of firewood as a makeshift shovel. When he finally forced it open, the world that greeted him was transformed. Snow had drifted in massive waves, some reaching 6 or 7 feet high. His truck was completely buried, just a vague outline beneath white. The access road had vanished entirely, erased by the blizzard. But the sky was lighter. Still overcast, but without the violent darkness of the storm. And the wind was just a whisper now, a ghost of its former fury. Victoria appeared beside him, wrapped in her blanket like a queen in an absurd royal robe. That's a lot of snow. 4 feet minimum, maybe 5 in the drifts. Daniel surveyed the landscape with a sinking feeling. We're not hiking out of here, not without proper gear. So we wait for rescue. Someone will come. Once the storm clears and emergency services can mobilize, they'll search the roads. My truck is visible from the highway if you know where to look. And if they don't know where to look, then we keep waiting. We still have a little food left. Enough firewood for another day if we're careful. But Daniel tried to sound more confident than he felt. Someone will find us. They spent the morning preparing. Daniel dug out as much of his truck as he could, making it more visible from the road. He found a red emergency blanket in the truck's storage and tied it to a tree branch, creating a flag that stood out against the white. Victoria, meanwhile, organized their remaining supplies and prepared what she calculated would be their last full meal if rescue didn't come by evening. The work kept them busy, kept fear at bay. But underneath the activity, both of them felt the weight of uncertainty. They'd survived the worst of the storm. Now they had to survive the aftermath. By noon, they'd done everything they could. They sat by the fire, fed with their dwindling wood supply, and ate a sparse lunch of cold vegetables straight from the can. What's the first thing you'll do when we get out of here? Victoria asked. Hold my daughter for about an hour straight. Daniel smiled at the thought. Then probably sleep for 2 days. You? Take the longest hot shower in human history. She paused. And then I need to make some phone calls to my VP of operations, to the board, to start fixing what I broke. You're really going to do it? Try to reopen something in Millbrook? I'm really going to try. Victoria met his eyes. I can't undo the closure, can't bring back the year of lost wages and uncertainty, but I can create new opportunities. Maybe not the same factory, but something, jobs, hope, a reason for people to believe that someone with power actually gives a damn about them. Daniel heard the determination in her voice, the shift from corporate executive to someone genuinely committed. It won't be easy. The town's been hurting for a year. A lot of people moved away. The ones who stayed are angry. They should be angry. I'd be angry. Victoria wrapped her hands around her mug. But anger can be transformed into action if you give people a real reason to believe things can change. I learned that from you. From me? You had every reason to leave me in that SUV, to let me freeze, to make me suffer for what I'd done. But you didn't. You chose humanity over revenge. That takes strength I didn't know still existed. Daniel felt uncomfortable with the praise. I'm not a saint. I thought about it. Leaving you. Letting karma do its work. But you didn't. That's what matters. Victoria set down her mug. Can I ask you something? And I need complete honesty. All right. When we get off this mountain and back to real life, when I'm Victoria Hale, CEO again, and you're Daniel Harper looking for work, do you think we can still talk? Really talk, like we have here? The question caught him off guard. He'd been avoiding thinking about the aftermath, about what happened when the emergency ended and they returned to their separate worlds. I don't know. He gestured at the cabin, the fire, the forced intimacy of their situation. This is a bubble. Real life is more complicated. I know it's complicated. I know you have every reason to want nothing to do with me, but I'm asking anyway. Her voice was steady but vulnerable. These 2 days talking to you, being seen as a person instead of a position, it's been the most real thing I've experienced in 12 years. I don't want to lose that when we leave here. Daniel considered his answer carefully. I think it depends on what you do when we get back. Whether the promises you made here translate into actual action. Whether you're willing to step out of your boardroom and into Millbrook, face the people you hurt, and do the hard work of making it right. And if I do that, if I prove I'm serious, then yeah, we can talk. Daniel surprised himself with the admission. I'd like that, actually, to stay in touch. See if the person I've gotten to know here is real or just a survival mechanism. Victoria smiled, sad and genuine. I'm afraid she's real, which means I'm going to have to figure out how to be her in the real world. That's terrifying. Change usually is. They sat in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the gray day continued. No sound of rescue yet. Daniel tried not to let worry creep in. It had only been a few hours since the storm cleared. Rescue teams needed time to mobilize, to clear roads, to search vast areas of wilderness. But as afternoon wore into evening and still no helicopter appeared, no sound of snowmobiles or emergency vehicles penetrated their isolation. Doubt began to settle in. They were down to their last few pieces of firewood. One can of soup remained. The cabin temperature was dropping as the fire weakened. We need to talk about tonight, Daniel said as darkness approached. We're almost out of wood. If rescue doesn't come, we're going to have to bundle up, combine body heat, and hope we can make it through without freezing. Victoria nodded, her face pale but determined. What do we need to do? Every blanket we have. Layered. Stay close together. Keep moving periodically to maintain circulation. Try to stay awake if possible. Falling asleep in extreme cold is dangerous. Okay. She helped him gather all the blankets, creating a nest in the corner farthest from drafts. Daniel, I'm scared. Me too. The honesty seemed to help. They prepared methodically, arranging their shelter, rationing the last of their water, eating the final can of soup while the fire still provided warmth. As night fell completely, Daniel fed the last of the wood to the flames, watching it catch with a mixture of relief and dread. This warmth would last a few hours at most. Then they'd be on their own. They settled into their blanket nest, pressed close together, both fully clothed with the ranger jacket spread over them like an additional layer. The fire burned bright for a while, throwing dancing shadows on the walls, making Daniel think of all the other people who'd sheltered in this cabin over the decades. Rangers and hikers and hunters. Had any of them faced a situation this desperate? Tell me more about Emma, Victoria said softly. Help me think about something other than the cold. So Daniel talked about Emma's first day of kindergarten when she'd marched into the classroom like she owned the place. About the time she'd tried to dig for dinosaur bones in their apartment building's parking lot and gotten covered in mud. About how she'd learned to make scrambled eggs so she could surprise him with breakfast, even though the eggs were always slightly burned and oversalted. She sounds like an old soul, Victoria said. She had to grow up fast. When Sophie was dying, Emma was only 2, but I swear she knew something was wrong. She'd bring Sophie her favorite toys, pat her hand, sing the lullabies Sophie used to sing to her. Daniel's voice caught. The day Sophie died, Emma climbed into the hospital bed with her, curled up like she used to when she was a baby, and just stayed there, like she was trying to keep her mom warm. I'm so sorry, Daniel. The worst part was explaining it afterward. How do you tell a 2-year-old that mommy isn't coming home? That she's not sick anymore because she's gone? Emma kept asking when we were going to visit mommy again, and I had to keep explaining over and over until finally it stuck. He wiped his eyes roughly. She cried for her every night for 6 months, every single night. Victoria's hand found his in the darkness. But she has you, and you've been enough. I hope so. Most days I feel like I'm failing her. You're not, trust me. A father who cares that much, who tries that hard, that's not failure. That's love. The fire burned lower. The temperature dropped. They pulled the blankets tighter, their bodies pressed together for warmth. Daniel could feel Victoria shivering despite the layers. Talk to me, he said. Tell me something. Anything. I don't have children to talk about, no heartwarming stories. Then tell me something else. Something real. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, I have a recurring dream. I've had it for years. I'm in the office, at my desk, working on quarterly reports, and everyone around me just fades. One by one, my employees become transparent, then disappear. Until it's just me in this massive empty building, surrounded by paperwork and silence. And I keep working because I don't know what else to do. That's bleak? It's honest. Her voice was small. I think it's my subconscious telling me what I already know, that I've built a life that looks successful but feels empty. That I've sacrificed connection for achievement and ended up alone. It's not too late to change that, isn't it? I'm 38 years old, no family except distant cousins I never see, no friends except business associates, no partner, no children, just a company and a bank account and a penthouse full of expensive furniture. So start now. When we get off this mountain, make different choices. What if I don't know how? The vulnerability in her voice was raw. What if I'm so far gone that I can't remember how to be a normal person? How to have coffee with someone without checking my phone? How to watch a movie without my laptop open? How to care about something that doesn't have a quarterly earnings impact? Daniel tightened his arms around her. Then you learn. Same way you learn to run a company. One step at a time. One choice at a time. Will you help me? The question hung in the cold air between them. Daniel knew what she was really asking. Not for business advice or strategic planning, but for human connection. For someone to care whether she succeeded or failed at the much harder task of building a life instead of just a career. Yeah, he said quietly. I'll help you. Victoria turned in his arms so she could see his face in the dying firelight. Why? After everything I did to you, why would you help me? Because these 2 days have shown me that you're more than the worst decision you've made. Because I think you genuinely want to change. And because... He paused, surprised by the truth of what he was about to say. Because I've been alone for a long time too, and I know how much it hurts. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Her eyes searched his face, looking for deception or pity, and finding neither. Then slowly, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. Thank you, she whispered. They stayed like that, foreheads touching, breath mingling in the cold air, two people who should have been enemies finding something like peace in the darkness. The fire died to embers, then to nothing. The cabin temperature plummeted. But wrapped in blankets and each other's warmth, they held on. Daniel dozed fitfully, jerking awake every time Victoria's shivering intensified, rubbing her arms and back to stimulate circulation, making sure she stayed conscious. She did the same for him when his body began to shut down, her voice in his ear keeping him tethered to awareness. Stay with me, Daniel. Tell me another Emma story. Too tired. Then I'll talk. I'll tell you about the time I tried to bake cookies for a board meeting and set off the fire alarm. Stay awake and listen. Her voice became his anchor. Stories about failed cooking attempts, about the cat she'd had in college that hated everyone, including her, about her father teaching her to drive in an empty parking lot and letting her crash into a light pole because he said experience was the best teacher. Did he yell at you? Daniel managed to ask. No, he just laughed and said now I knew what not to do. Then he taught me how to file an insurance claim. Victoria's laugh was soft in the darkness. He was a terrible business teacher in the traditional sense, no lectures about leadership or strategy, but he taught me that mistakes were just data points, that failure was only permanent if you didn't learn from it. Sounds like he was wise. He was. I wish I'd remembered that lesson before I became so afraid of making mistakes that I stopped seeing people as people. You're seeing now. Because you forced me to. Because this storm forced me to. Good storms do that sometimes. Break things down so they can be rebuilt better. Victoria shifted closer, if that was even possible. Is that what this is? A good storm? Ask me when we're not freezing to death. She laughed, the sound surprising in the darkness. Fair point. The hours crawled by. The cold was relentless, pressing in from all sides, seeking entry through every gap in their blanket fortress. Daniel's fingers and toes had gone numb hours ago. He couldn't feel Victoria's face against his neck anymore, which terrified him until he realized his own face was numb too. Victoria, you still with me? Still here, barely, but here. Good. Keep talking. What's the first place you'll go when we get out of here? Besides the shower? Her voice was weak but present. I think I'll go to Millbrook. Walk through the town. See what I did. Really see it, not just drive through on the way to somewhere else. That'll be hard. People there are angry. They should be. I'd rather face their anger honestly than hide from it in my penthouse. She paused. Will you come with me? When I go? You want me there? I want someone who'll tell me the truth, who won't let me retreat into corporate speak when things get uncomfortable. That's you. Daniel felt a surge of warmth that had nothing to do with body heat. Yeah, I'll come with you. Promise? Promise. A silence fell again, broken only by their breathing and the occasional creak of the cabin settling. Daniel's mind was getting foggy, thoughts becoming disconnected. He knew that was dangerous, a sign that his core temperature was dropping too low. He forced himself to stay present, to keep checking on Victoria, to maintain consciousness. Daniel? Her voice seemed to come from far away. Yeah? If we don't make it, don't. Listen to me. If we don't make it, I need you to know that I'm grateful. For these days, for you showing me what I'd become and what I could still be. For not letting me die alone and frozen and unchanged. We're going to make it. But if we don't, Victoria, stop. We're going to survive this. We've come too far to give up now. How can you be sure? Because I have a daughter waiting for me. Because you have a company to fix and a town to help. Because our story doesn't end in a frozen cabin on a mountain. It ends with us walking out of here, changed but alive. You sound very certain. I have to be. For both of us. Victoria made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. You're a stubborn man, Daniel Harper. My father's son. They fell silent again, conserving energy, conserving breath. Daniel drifted in and out of awareness, dreams and reality blending. He saw Emma running toward him across a sunlit field, saw Sophie smiling that chaotic smile, saw his father nodding approval, saw Victoria as she might be in a year, 2 years, transformed by choices into someone whole. Somewhere in the distance, a sound penetrated his consciousness, mechanical, rhythmic, growing louder. Do you hear that? Victoria's voice was sharp with sudden alertness. Daniel forced his eyes open, forced his mind to focus. The sound was real, not imagined. A helicopter, distant but approaching. Helicopter, he managed. Rescue. They struggled out of their blanket nest, bodies protesting, limbs barely responding. Daniel stumbled to the door, wrenched it open. The pre-dawn sky was lightening, gray turning to pale pink. And there, growing louder by the second, a helicopter with searchlights swept across the snow-covered landscape. Here! Daniel's voice was hoarse. We're here! He staggered outside, waving his arms, falling into snow that reached his thighs. Victoria was beside him, adding her voice to his, both of them shouting and waving like survivors of a shipwreck spotting a distant sail. The helicopter banked, circled back. The searchlight found them, pinned them in its bright circle. Daniel's eyes watered from the intensity, from relief, from the sudden certainty that they were going to live. The helicopter descended, finding a flat spot 50 yards from the cabin. 2 rescue personnel jumped out, running toward them through the snow. We've got you, one of them shouted. You're safe now! Safe. The word felt foreign after 3 days of constant danger. Daniel's legs gave out, and he sank into the snow. Strong hands caught him, supported him. How many survivors? 2, Victoria answered, her voice stronger than his. Both hypothermic. 3 days in the storm. Jesus, okay, let's get you both to the chopper. Can you walk? They could, barely. With support from the rescue crew, Daniel and Victoria stumbled through the snow toward the waiting helicopter. The rotors created a windstorm that pelted them with ice crystals, but after 3 days of mountain blizzard, it felt like nothing. Inside the helicopter, wrapped in emergency blankets with heat packs pressed against their bodies, Daniel finally let himself relax. Across from him, Victoria was crying silently, tears streaming down her face, not from pain or fear, but from relief so profound it demanded release. Their eyes met. No words were needed. They'd survived. Together. And nothing would ever be quite the same. The helicopter lifted, carrying them away from the cabin that had been prison and sanctuary, away from the mountain that had tested them to their limits. Below, the storm's damage was visible. Downed trees, buried roads, a landscape transformed by nature's violence. But as Daniel looked out the window, the rising sun broke through the clouds. painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of gold and pink, beautiful and terrible, like everything that mattered. Victoria's hand found his across the helicopter's interior. He squeezed it, felt her squeeze back. A promise. A beginning. A recognition that what had started as a storm-forced imprisonment had become something neither of them had expected. A connection that might, just might, survive the transition back to real life, if they were brave enough to let it. The hospital room was too bright, too warm, too clean. After 3 days in the cabin's darkness, Daniel felt disoriented by the fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. A nurse had checked his vitals, confirmed mild hypothermia and dehydration, and hooked him up to an IV. Victoria was in the room next door receiving similar treatment, but all Daniel could think about was Emma. "Mr. Harper?" A doctor appeared in the doorway. "You have some visitors who have been very anxious to see you." Then Emma was running into the room, Mrs. Chen following close behind, and Daniel forgot about everything else. His daughter crashed into him, throwing her small arms around his neck with enough force to make the IV pull uncomfortably. "Daddy, Daddy, you're okay." "I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm so okay." Daniel held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her solid warmth against him. Real, safe, home. "I was so scared, Mrs. Chen said you got stuck in the storm, and I thought... Emma's voice dissolved into sobs. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I scared you." Daniel pulled back enough to look at her face, to wipe away her tears. "But I'm here now. I'm safe." Mrs. Chen stood in the doorway, her own eyes wet. "We saw the news about the rescue. They said 2 people pulled from the mountain. I prayed it was you." "It was. And I owe you everything for taking care of Emma. That child is family. No debt between family." Mrs. Chen smiled. "I'll give you 2 some time. Emma, I'll be right outside." Emma climbed carefully onto the hospital bed, curling against Daniel's side like she used to when she was smaller. "Tell me what happened. Tell me everything." So Daniel told her an edited version about the storm, the cabin, the rescue. He left out the parts about hypothermia and near death and the complicated woman in the next room. Emma didn't need those details. She just needed to know her father had survived. "Were you alone?" Emma asked. "No. I helped someone whose car broke down. A woman. We waited out the storm together." "Was she nice?" Daniel considered the question. "She is now. It's complicated." Emma seemed satisfied with that answer. She stayed pressed against him for a long time, occasionally touching his face as if to confirm he was real. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her and she fell asleep, her small body warm and trusting against his side. Daniel closed his own eyes, let himself drift. He was safe. Emma was safe. Everything else could wait, except it couldn't. The next morning, after Emma had gone home with Mrs. Chen and Daniel had been cleared for discharge, he found Victoria in the hospital cafeteria. She looked different in borrowed hospital scrubs, her hair pulled back, no makeup. Smaller somehow. More human. "Hey," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Hey." She was staring at a cup of coffee like it held the answers to the universe. "They're releasing me in an hour. My assistant is sending a car." "Back to Denver?" "Back to reality." Victoria looked up at him. "Daniel, these past 3 days, I know." "Do you?" "Because I'm terrified that the moment I leave this hospital, I'm going to revert to who I was. That all the promises I made in that cabin will evaporate the second I'm back in my penthouse, back in my boardroom." "Then don't let that happen." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." Daniel leaned forward. "You said you wanted to fix what you broke. So fix it. Not tomorrow, not next quarter. Now." Victoria's jaw tightened. "I have a company to run, shareholders expecting up." "There it is, the retreat, the corporate speak." Daniel kept his voice level but firm. "You're already doing it, Victoria. Already building the walls back up." "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You asked me to help you, to keep you honest. So I'm keeping you honest. What are you going to do? Right now. Today. To prove that the person I met in that cabin was real." Victoria stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, she pulled out her phone. "You're right. You're absolutely right." She dialed, waited. James? It's Victoria. Clear my schedule for the next 3 days. Everything. I don't care what's on the calendar. Meetings, calls, all of it. Reschedule. A pause. No, I'm fine. I'm just making different choices. And James? Book me a room at the Mountain View Inn in Millbrook, tonight. She ended the call, set the phone down with trembling hands. There. I did it. Good. Now what? Now I go to Millbrook. I see what I did. And then... She took a shaky breath. Then I figure out how to fix it. You want company? Victoria's eyes met his, vulnerable and hopeful. More than anything. 3 days later, Daniel stood on Main Street in Millbrook, watching Victoria Hale walk into the town she'd devastated. She'd insisted on walking from the inn rather than driving, said she needed to see everything up close. Now she moved slowly down the sidewalk, taking in the boarded-up storefronts, the faded for sale signs, the emptiness where vitality used to be. "Oh God," she whispered. "What did I do?" Daniel saw it through her eyes. The hardware store that had closed because factory workers were its main customers. The diner operating on reduced hours. The elementary school playground, half empty because families had moved away seeking work. The fabric of a community, torn. "You see it now?" he asked quietly. "I see it." Victoria's voice was thick. "The numbers on a spreadsheet, this is what they looked like in the real world." They continued walking. People noticed her, recognition flickering across faces, followed by expressions ranging from confusion to anger. Tom Rodriguez was coming out of the post office when he spotted them. "Harper?" Tom's voice was cautious. "That you?" "Hey, Tom. How are you doing?" "Getting by. Found work in Glenwood, but the commute's killing me." Tom's eyes shifted to Victoria, narrowed. "Isn't that—" "Victoria Hale," she said, stepping forward before Daniel could intervene. "I'm the one who closed the factory. I'm the reason you lost your job." Tom's face hardened. "Why are you here? Come to admire your handiwork?" "I came to apologize. To you and to everyone else I hurt. And to try to make it right." "Make it right?" "Lady, you can't make this right. I lost my house. My wife had to go back to work when she should be retired. My son had to drop out of college because we can't afford it anymore. I know. And I'm sorry. Genuinely, deeply sorry." Victoria's voice didn't waver despite the tears in her eyes. "I made a decision based on spreadsheets and projections, and I didn't consider the human cost. That was wrong. I was wrong." Tom looked like he wanted to yell, to unleash the fury of a year's worth of frustration. But something in Victoria's face, the genuine regret, the lack of defensiveness, stopped him. "What are you going to do about it?" he asked finally. "I'm going to reopen a facility here. Not the same factory. The economics of that don't work. But something new. Advanced manufacturing, green technology production, jobs that pay well and have growth potential." Victoria pulled out her phone, showed him something. "I've already talked to my VP of operations. We're fast-tracking a feasibility study. If the numbers work, and I believe they will, we break ground in 6 months." Tom stared at the phone, then at her. "You're serious?" "Completely serious. I'm also creating a fund to help people who lost their homes because of the closure. It won't erase what happened, but it might help some families get back on their feet." "Why?" Tom's voice was rough. "Why now?" Victoria glanced at Daniel. "Because someone showed me what I'd become and gave me a chance to be better. And because it's the right thing to do, even if it's a year too late." Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "I'm still angry. At you, at the situation, at all of it. But if you're really going to bring jobs back, thank you." Victoria shook his hand, and Daniel saw her blinking back tears. This was hard for her, being vulnerable, facing anger without corporate shields, acting from conscience rather than strategy. But she was doing it. They spent the next 2 days in Millbrook. Victoria met with local officials, toured the empty factory building, talked to former employees. Some cursed her out. Some refused to speak to her at all. But others, like Tom, cautiously accepted her apology and her commitment to change. Through it all, Daniel stayed by her side, not as a shield, but as a witness. Someone to keep her honest when corporate instincts tried to take over. Someone to remind her why she was really there. On the third evening, they sat in the empty factory parking lot as the sun set behind the mountains. Victoria was exhausted, emotionally wrung out from days of confronting her mistakes. "I met Bill Chen's widow today," she said quietly. "She invited me in for tea, showed me pictures of her grandson, the one Bill never got to meet, named William, after him." "How was that?" "Devastating. She was so kind, so forgiving. It made it worse somehow." Victoria wiped her eyes. "She said Bill used to talk about ideas for improving the factory, ways to make it more efficient, but management never listened. That was the culture you created." "I know." Victoria turned to look at him. "I'm changing that top to bottom. I'm implementing open-door policies, worker input programs, profit sharing. I'm making sure that what happened here never happens again." "That's good. That's important work." "It's not enough, though, is it? I can't bring Bill back. Can't undo the pain I caused." "No, but you can honor his memory by doing better, by making sure his ideas, and ideas from people like him, are heard going forward." Daniel paused. "Redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about building a different future." Victoria nodded slowly. "When did you get so wise?" 3 days in a cabin with a stubborn CEO. It was either get wise or freeze to death." She laughed despite herself. Then, more seriously, "Daniel, I need to ask you something." "Okay." "The new facility in Millbrook, when it opens, I want you to run it. Director of Operations. Full benefits, competitive salary, input on hiring and procedures. A real leadership position." Daniel felt his heart skip. "Victoria, before you say no, hear me out. You know this community. You understand manufacturing. You have ideas for improving efficiency that I should have listened to a year ago. And more than that, you'll keep me honest. You'll make sure I don't lose sight of the human element. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a partnership, a chance to rebuild what I broke, but better, with worker input from day one, with respect and dignity built into the foundation." Victoria met his eyes. "And selfishly, I'm asking you to stay in my life, because these past days have shown me what real connection looks like, and I don't want to lose that." Daniel's mind raced. A real job, security for Emma, benefits, a future, everything he'd been fighting for. But accepting it from Victoria felt complicated, like mixing business with something that had become deeply personal. "I need to think about it," he said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Victoria stood, brushed off her pants. "I should get back to Denver tomorrow. Board meeting on Monday. But Daniel, thank you for everything, for saving my life, for showing me how to be human again, for not letting me retreat into old patterns. You did the hard work yourself. I had a good teacher." She smiled, sad and genuine. "Don't be a stranger, okay? Even if you don't take the job, I'd like to stay in touch." "I'd like that too." They drove back to the inn in comfortable silence. At the entrance, Victoria turned to him one more time. "You know what the strangest part is?" she said. "I came up that mountain running away from decisions I didn't want to face. And I got trapped in a storm with the one person who could show me how to face them. If I believed in fate, I'd say the universe was trying to tell me something. What would it be saying? That sometimes you have to get completely lost to find your way home." She touched his arm briefly. "Good night, Daniel." "Good night, Victoria." A week later, Daniel was sitting at his kitchen table helping Emma with her dinosaur homework when his phone rang. Victoria's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," he answered. "Hey, do you have a minute?" "For you?" "Yeah. I've been in meetings all week with the board and operations team. The Millbrook facility is approved. We're moving forward." Victoria's voice was energized, alive in a way he hadn't heard before. "But that's not why I'm calling." "No." "I took your advice about building a life, not just a career. I joined a book club, actual people meeting in person to discuss novels. It's terrifying and awkward, and I love it." Daniel smiled deep. "That's great, Victoria. And I've started seeing a therapist, working through some things, like why I built walls so high that I couldn't see over them anymore." She paused. "It's hard, harder than any business negotiation, but it's good. I'm proud of you." "Thanks. That means a lot." Another pause. "Have you thought about the job offer?" Daniel looked at Emma, absorbed in drawing a stegosaurus. Thought about the past year of struggle, of uncertainty, of wondering how he'd provide for his daughter. Thought about Victoria's genuine commitment to change, to doing better. I have, and I want to accept, but with conditions. Name them. I want input on all hiring decisions. I want worker representation on the facility advisory board. I want profit sharing for all employees, not just management. And I want it in writing that workers can bring concerns directly to leadership without fear of retaliation. Done. All of it. I'll have contracts drawn up by Friday. Just like that? Just like that. You were right, Daniel. The best ideas come from the people doing the actual work. It's past time I started listening. Victoria's voice softened. Besides, I trust you. Completely. If you say those things are important, they're important. Daniel felt something warm spreading through his chest. Trust. Partnership. The foundation of something that could actually work. Then I accept. Really? Really? When do I start? Officially, 3 months. That gives us time to finalize the facility design, start the permitting process, begin recruiting. But I'd like you to come to Denver next week if possible. Meet with the operations team, review the plans, make sure we're building this right. I can do that. Bring Emma. I'd like to meet her. And I know a great natural history museum with an excellent dinosaur exhibit. Daniel's throat tightened. She'd remembered. From a conversation in a freezing cabin days ago, she'd remembered Emma's dream of seeing the dinosaur exhibit. She'd love that, thank you. I'll send you the details. And Daniel, thank you for taking a chance on me, on this. Thank you for giving me a reason to. After they hung up, Emma looked up from her drawing. Was that the lady from the mountain? Yeah, how did you know? You smile different when you talk to her, like how you smiled at pictures of Mom. The observation startled him. It's not like that, Em. We're just friends. Okay. Emma returned to her drawing, unconcerned with adult complications. Can we really go see the dinosaurs? We really can. Yes! Emma pumped her fist in the air. Daddy, this is the best day ever! Daniel pulled her into a hug, this brilliant, resilient girl who'd weathered so much loss and uncertainty with grace he couldn't comprehend. You know what? I think you might be right. The next 6 months passed in a blur of activity. Daniel traveled to Denver regularly, working with Victoria's team on facility design. They incorporated ideas from former Millbrook workers, created ergonomic workstations, built-in environmental controls and safety features that exceeded industry standards. The building itself was designed to lead certification standards. Victoria's commitment to green technology wasn't just marketing. Through it all, Danielle and Victoria's friendship deepened. They talked almost daily, sometimes about work, often about other things. She told him about her book club's arguments over plot holes and character motivation. He told her about Emma's straight-A report card and her growing collection of dinosaur models. Sometimes their calls lasted hours, meandering through topics with the ease of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Other times they were brief check-ins. How's your day? Exhausting but good. Yours? That felt important precisely because they were routine. Victoria visited Millbrook regularly, meeting with community members, updating them on progress, slowly rebuilding trust. Tom Rodriguez became an unlikely ally, helping her navigate local politics and worker sentiment. She hired him as a community liaison, a bridge between corporate and the people actually affected by corporate decisions. You're changing, Daniel told her during one of her visits. They were standing at the construction site, watching the foundation being poured for the new facility. I am, she agreed, slowly, with setbacks, but I'm trying. It shows. Victoria smiled, then turned serious. Can I tell you something? And I need you to really hear it. Always. These months, working with you, building this, it's been the happiest I've been in years. Maybe ever. Not because of the project, though that's fulfilling, but because I feel like I have a real partner, someone who challenges me, keeps me honest, cares about the work and the people and the outcome. She paused. Someone who sees me, not just the position or the money. I see you, Victoria. All of you. The brilliant strategist and the woman who burns cookies, and the person trying really hard to do better. Thank you, but she held his gaze. I think I'm falling for you, Daniel. And I know that's complicated and maybe completely inappropriate given our working relationship, but I promised myself after the mountain that I'd be honest about what I feel. So there it is. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. He'd felt it too, this pull toward her, had been trying to deny it, rationalize it away as trauma bonding or circumstantial connection. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. I think I'm falling for you too, he admitted. And you're right, it's complicated. I have Emma to think about. You have a company to run. We live in different cities. We're from completely different worlds. But I also think that maybe those complications don't have to be deal breakers. Maybe we figure it out together, one day at a time, one honest conversation at a time. Victoria's smile was radiant. I'd like that. No rushing, no pressure, just seeing where this goes? Seeing where it goes, Daniel agreed. She stepped closer and Daniel let himself kiss her. Gentle, tentative, full of promise and uncertainty and hope. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. That was nice, Victoria said. Yeah, it really was. The facility opened 9 months after that conversation in a ceremony attended by half of Millbrook. Victoria gave a speech acknowledging her mistakes, thanking the community for giving her a chance at redemption, and committing Hale Industries to being a genuine partner in the town's recovery. Then she turned the microphone over to Daniel. A year and a half ago, I lost my job when this factory closed, he began. I was angry, bitter, felt like the world had abandoned people like me. And then I got trapped in a storm with the woman responsible, and everything changed. He found Victoria in the crowd, saw her eyes shining with tears. She could have stayed the same, could have made corporate apologies and moved on, but she chose to do the hard work of actually changing, of listening, of building something better. Daniel gestured to the building behind him. This facility represents second chances. For this community, yes, but also for all of us. A chance to build a workplace that respects workers, values their input, shares profits equitably. A chance to prove that business can be both profitable and humane. And a chance for me personally to build a future for my daughter. Emma, sitting in the front row wearing her favorite dinosaur t-shirt, waved enthusiastically. The crowd laughed. So, thank you, Daniel concluded. To Victoria for having the courage to change. To all of you for being willing to give this a chance. And to the storm that brought us here. Sometimes the hardest moments lead to the best outcomes. The crowd applauded. The ribbon was cut. Tours began. By the end of the day, 47 people had submitted job applications, and the local newspaper had declared it a new beginning for Millbrook. That evening, Daniel, Victoria, and Emma had dinner at the diner, no longer on reduced hours, revitalized by the influx of workers and optimism. Miss Victoria, Emma said around a mouthful of French fries, Daddy says you like dinosaurs. I'm learning to appreciate them, Victoria said, smiling at Daniel. Your dad's been educating me. Did you know that velociraptors were actually only about the size of a turkey? And they had feathers. The movies got it all wrong. I did not know that. Tell me more. Daniel watched as Emma launched into an enthusiastic lecture about dinosaur inaccuracies in popular media, and Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions, engaging completely. This woman who'd once inhabited only boardrooms and penthouses, now sitting in a small-town diner, connecting with his daughter over prehistoric creatures. Something settled in his chest. Peace. Hope. The feeling that maybe, against all odds, they were building something real. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep in the truck on the way home, Victoria walked Daniel to his door. She's incredible, Victoria said. Smart, funny, kind. You've done an amazing job with her. Thanks. She likes you too. Asked me if you were my girlfriend. What did you tell her? That we're figuring it out together. Was that okay? That was perfect. Victoria kissed him softly. I should get back to Denver. Early meeting tomorrow. You could stay. I have a guest room. Are you sure? I'm sure. If you want to. Victoria smiled. I want to. They stood on his doorstep, this unlikely pair, connected by storm and struggle and the choice to see each other clearly. Above them, stars glittered in the mountain sky, the same stars that had shone on the cabin, on their worst night, and their moments of revelation. Daniel, Victoria said quietly, thank you. for coming back for me on that road, for not giving up on me in the cabin, for believing I could change. Thank you for actually changing, for doing the hard work, for being brave enough to be vulnerable. We make a good team." "Yeah," Daniel said, pulling her close. "We really do." Inside, Emma's soft snoring drifted from her bedroom. Outside, Millbrook slept peacefully, its future brighter than it had been in a year. And here, in the doorway, two people who should have remained enemies held each other in the quiet night, proof that sometimes the coldest storms didn't just test people. They revealed who they truly were and quietly opened doors to futures neither had imagined. The mountain loomed in the distance, silent and eternal, keeper of their story. The storm had passed. The cabin stood empty again, waiting for the next lost souls who might need shelter. But its gift remained, the understanding that redemption was possible, that change took courage, and that sometimes the people who challenged us most became the ones who transformed us completely. Daniel and Victoria had found their way through the storm. Now they were building something new, together. One honest choice at a time, one shared moment at a time, one future at a time. And that, Daniel thought, as Victoria's head rested against his shoulder, was more than enough. It was everything.